You didn't choose to want what you want. The desire for pleasure, to feel good, to avoid discomfort, to stay entertained, was installed in you long before you could question it. From your earliest moments, the world whispered, "If it feels good, it must be right. If it hurts, run." You were rewarded for smiling, not thinking, for obedience, not introspection, for fitting in, not for feeling deeply. As a child, a sweet treat quieted your tears. As a teen, a screen distracted your sadness. As an adult, pleasure became the anesthetic that made your life tolerable. But somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing something important. Pleasure wasn't just a choice anymore. It became a reflex. The system doesn't need to oppress you. It just needs to keep you stimulated, keep you busy, keep you feeling good enough to never ask, "Is this real?" This is the first lie. That happiness is the same thing as pleasure. It's not. Happiness has roots. It requires meaning, depth, pain, risk. Pleasure floats on the surface. It numbs. It pacifies. It distracts you from the fact that you might be living a life that doesn't belong to you. We've been conditioned to believe that the pursuit of feeling good is the same as the pursuit of being alive. But you can be drowning in dopamine and still starving for purpose. This isn't accidental. Our society, from media to markets, depends on your need for more. More likes, more sugar, more comfort, more validation, more noise. Because if you ever stopped, if you turned everything off, if you sat with yourself in silence, you might realize how much of your desire isn't even yours. It was fed to you, branded into your nervous system, marketed as self-care, sold as self-love, when really, it's just self-avoidance. Pleasure is not the enemy. The addiction to it is. This chapter isn't about demonizing enjoyment. It's about recognizing that when pleasure becomes the goal, you lose the ability to feel anything else. You become addicted not to joy, but to escape. And when you escape long enough, you forget what it means to face life on your own terms. You weren't meant to live like this. Stuck in loops of instant gratification, scrolling for meaning, eating your emotions, watching instead of living. You were meant to remember what's real. And real things don't always feel good. They challenge you. They demand your attention. They ask you to stay present when it hurts. And that's where truth begins. The world trained you to chase pleasure. Now it's time to learn how to feel again. The most effective prison is the one you don't know you're in. And the strongest chains are the ones that feel like freedom. Aldous Huxley didn't fear pain, he feared pleasure. In Brave New World, there is no dictatorship, no torture, no threat of death. There is only pleasure, endless, numbing, soft. People are happy, artificially, chemically, socially. They take soma instead of asking questions. They have sex instead of intimacy. They consume instead of create. No one rebels because no one suffers, not outwardly. And that's the genius of the trap. Keep people comfortable, and they'll surrender everything. Huxley's warning wasn't fiction, it was prophecy. He foresaw a society not enslaved by fear, but sedated by desire. A culture where noise replaces thought, and stimulation replaces meaning. Look around. We scroll endlessly, not out of joy, but to avoid stillness. We buy things we don't need to feel a spike of dopamine. We numb every uncomfortable emotion, with sugar, with screens, with sex, with distraction. And the worst part, we call this freedom. But it's not freedom, it's compliance. Because when you're addicted to pleasure, you're easy to control. You won't speak up. You don't want to lose access. You won't resist. Resistance is uncomfortable. You won't ask hard questions. They might disrupt your flow of gratification. You become manageable, docile, predictable, exactly what Huxley predicted. A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced, he wrote, because they love their servitude. Let that sink in. Because they love their servitude. Pleasure becomes the leash, and you walk yourself. But here's the catch. Deep down, you know something is off. Even in the middle of pleasure, there's a hollowness, a quiet ache. You feel it when the screen goes dark, when the food doesn't satisfy, when the noise fades and the silence creeps in. You realize, I'm not okay. Even when everything feels good, something feels wrong. That's the soul waking up. That's the part of you that refuses to be drugged by dopamine. Because pleasure isn't the problem. It's the substitution. Pleasure has replaced joy. It's replaced truth. It's replaced presence, connection, meaning. And like any drug, the more you consume it, the less it works. So you chase more. More intensity, more novelty, more everything. Until one day, you realize you're not chasing pleasure, you're running from yourself. This is the cage, beautiful, seductive, and soft, but still a cage. And you can't escape it by consuming more. You escape it by becoming conscious of it. You start noticing where your habits keep you numb. You feel the discomfort you've buried. You question the stories you've been fed, the ones that say pleasure equals happiness and pain equals failure. You begin to ask, what am I not feeling? What am I avoiding? What part of me has been asleep, dreaming in dopamine? And then, very slowly, the cage begins to crack. You put the phone down, not forever, but with awareness. You feel the sadness instead of avoiding it. You let yourself be bored. You breathe before reacting. You choose silence over stimulation. And suddenly, you taste something different. Clarity. The clarity of presence. The clarity of not needing to feel good every second. The clarity of being awake, even when it hurts. That's what Huxley tried to show us. That when pleasure becomes the goal, we stop evolving. We stop seeing. We stop living. And we trade our humanity for convenience. But the truth? You weren't born to be entertained. You were born to be free. Every moment of your day is filled, music in your ears, notifications on your screen, new content, new hits, new distractions. There is no silence, only signal. And yet, with all this stimulation, you feel tired, anxious, restless, numb. Why? Because your nervous system was never designed for this much input. Your soul wasn't made for constant stimulation. It was made for meaning. The pursuit of pleasure, when constant, turns into exhaustion. Like drinking salt water when you're thirsty, the more you consume, the thirstier you become. Neuroscience confirms what Huxley intuited. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, is short-lived. Every spike in pleasure creates a crash. The more hits you chase, the more you dull your baseline. Over time, the brain adapts. It requires more stimulus to feel the same effect. This is how addiction forms. Not just to substances, but to distraction. To the need for something, anything, to feel alive. And when the stimulus fades, you crash into a discomfort that feels unbearable. You mistake emptiness for anxiety. But it's not anxiety. It's your real self asking to be felt. The more you run from that self, the more shallow your inner world becomes. You stop being able to sit still. You can't read deeply. You can't tolerate silence. You can't connect without scrolling. You can feel joy unless it is curated. And worst of all, you start to fear stillness. Because in stillness, your pain rises, your questions rise, your unlived life rises. So you turn up the noise again. You grab your phone, you binge, you click, you numb. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught how to feel. No one told you that discomfort is part of healing, that boredom is where creativity is born, that grief is a sacred teacher. That presence isn't passive, it's power. Instead, You were taught to treat discomfort like a glitch, something to escape, something to mute. But you can't mute pain without muting purpose. You can't deaden sadness without also dulling joy. The constant pursuit of stimulation doesn't just fragment your attention, it fragments your identity. You start asking the wrong questions. What will make me feel better right now? Instead of, what needs to be felt so I can grow? And that shift is everything. Because the true cost of constant pleasure isn't just fatigue, it's disconnection. Disconnection from yourself, from others, from meaning, from the world. You become a shell that reacts, but no longer reflects. You consume, but no longer create. You move, but you're not going anywhere real. This is the trap of stimulation. And it is not solved by abstinence alone. It's solved by awareness, by choosing discomfort as an ally, by letting presence hurt you a little so it can heal you a lot. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Connection to your body, to your breath, to your boredom, to your unfiltered thoughts, to your unmet needs. And slowly you begin to return to something ancient, your capacity to sit with what is. No screen, no numbing, just you. At first, it's terrifying. Then, it's profound. Because behind the noise, behind the cravings, behind the fatigue, there's still a self that is not built on pleasure, a self that does not need to be constantly entertained, a self that remembers how to feel without running. You don't need more pleasure, you need more presence. Because presence is what reconnects you to life, not as a show, but as something sacred. And the moment you stop chasing stimulation, you'll feel something strange. Stillness, depth, reality. That's not the absence of joy. That's where real joy begins. The world doesn't teach you how to face pain. It teaches you how to flee. From the first scraped knee to your first heartbreak, you're trained to reach for something, anything, that will make it stop. A screen, a snack, a joke, a drug, a distraction. We are not addicted to pleasure. We are addicted to avoiding what hurts. But here's the truth. What you're avoiding is not just discomfort. It's yourself. The parts of you buried. The grief you never named. The silence you never entered. The shadows you never faced. You don't want pleasure. You want to feel safe. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that safety meant numbing, that healing meant avoiding, that strength meant not feeling. But that's not strength. It's paralysis. The more you run from pain, the more it controls you. Pain doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It waits. It turns into anxiety. It hides in your relationships. It slips into your self-worth. It hardens into patterns you don't understand, until your life no longer feels like your own. The pursuit of pleasure is often just a clever way to stay away from all that, to stay distracted from the ache in your chest, to keep moving fast enough so that nothing catches up, to stay on the surface where nothing can drown you. But the irony is, you're already drowning, not in pain, but in avoidance. And it costs you everything, your clarity, your depth, your capacity to truly connect with yourself and others. Because the person who can't feel pain can't feel anything. Not love, not wonder, not truth. You weren't meant to avoid pain. You were meant to understand it. Because pain is not your enemy. Pain is information. It's a compass. It tells you where the wound is. It tells you what still matters. It tells you where your healing must begin. But when you drown it in stimulation, you miss the message. You miss the call to slow down, the call to turn inward, the call to face what hurts instead of escaping it. Aldous Huxley wrote that the greatest threat to freedom wasn't tyranny, it was distraction. And nothing distracts better than comfort. We chase comfort to avoid silence. Because in silence, we might hear something we don't want to face. that we're lonely, that we're unfulfilled, that we're still grieving, that we're not living the life we want. Pleasure keeps the noise loud enough that you never have to hear the truth. But what if you turned down the volume? What if, just for a moment, you allowed yourself to feel the sadness, the shame, the ache, the emptiness, the hunger for something real? It would hurt, but it would also wake you up. Because under all the layers of avoidance, you are not broken, you are buried, and pain, when felt consciously, becomes the shovel. It digs, it breaks, it releases, until finally, you see what's underneath all the addiction, all the craving, all the stimulation. A self that is honest, a self that is awake, a self that is capable of being with life as it is. No escape, no numbing, no false peace, just presence. And in that presence, something changes. You don't need the hit. You don't need the noise. You don't need the mask, because now you can sit with yourself and not run. Freedom isn't found in what you avoid. It's found in what you're willing to feel. What if your suffering isn't the problem, but your refusal to grow through it is? We've been sold a version of freedom that looks like this. Do what you want. Feel good all the time. Avoid discomfort at all costs. But that isn't freedom. That's sedation. That's spiritual sedation, wrapped in the language of liberation. Real freedom doesn't feel like a vacation. It feels like friction. Because anything that awakens you will challenge you. It will ask you to let go, to stand alone, to feel deeply. Pleasure doesn't ask for that. Pain does. Conscious discomfort does. Aldous Huxley understood this. In a world where everything is pleasant, nothing is meaningful. When life becomes too easy, we become empty. In Brave New World, the characters are shielded from all difficulty. Death is sanitized, love is trivialized, even grief is suppressed with soma. And in return, they lose their humanity. Actual happiness always looks pretty squalid in comparison with the overcompensations for misery, Huxley wrote. And of course, stability isn't nearly so spectacular as instability. And being contented has none of the glamour of a good fight against misfortune. He wasn't glamorizing pain, he was respecting it. Because without friction, there's no resistance. And without resistance, there's no strength. A life without difficulty is a life without direction. Comfort zones are cozy, but they're not sacred. They don't grow you. They don't test you. They don't show you what you're capable of. And here's the truth no one wants to hear. Comfort doesn't make you safe. It makes you soft. It makes you fearful of truth, fearful of rejection, fearful of change, fearful of your own power. But friction invites movement. It creates pressure. It sparks transformation. When you stop avoiding it, something incredible happens. You begin to tolerate truth. You begin to sit in your discomfort without numbing it. You begin to build spiritual muscle, the kind that doesn't bend in the face of chaos. This is what real freedom feels like. Saying no when it costs you. Holding space for your sadness without drowning in it. Walking away from what numbs you. Not because you have to, but because you've outgrown it. That's not ease. That's power. And it's messy. It's unglamorous. It doesn't look good on Instagram. But it's yours. Freedom isn't handed to you. It's forged in friction. The modern world teaches that freedom is having unlimited options. But that's a lie. Real freedom is having the clarity to choose what aligns, and the discipline to walk away from what doesn't. And that clarity only comes when you stop numbing and start feeling. You will never be free until you stop confusing comfort with peace. Peace is active, it's grounded, it's earned through awareness. Comfort is passive. It keeps you asleep. It keeps you agreeable, predictable, dull. And you are none of those things. You are not here to float. You are here to forge. Forge insight. Forge courage. Forge meaning. Not in spite of difficulty, but through it. Because the fire that burns away your illusions also reveals your essence. Freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of self through pain. And when you've been through that fire, when you've faced the friction, felt the sting, survived the silence, you come out different. Not harder, just more real. Not colder, just more awake. And that version of you, the one who doesn't chase constant pleasure because they've found something deeper, that is the beginning of true liberation. There comes a moment, maybe in silence, maybe after collapse, when you realize you're not empty, you're numb. And there is a difference. Emptiness is open, spacious, sacred. It invites presence. Numbness is a wall. It keeps life out. The pursuit of pleasure didn't free you. It dulled you. It turned your days into routines of stimulation without sensation, experience without embodiment. And now, when something real touches you, love, grief, beauty, pain, you barely feel it. Because the circuits are burnt, because the system is overstimulated, because your heart has been conditioned to flinch at intensity. You weren't meant to live this way, buffered from life, shielded from meaning, safe but hollow. You were meant to feel, to tremble, to ache, to stand still in front of something so honest it leaves you speechless. That's where aliveness begins. Not in constant highs, but in full-spectrum presence. Aldous Huxley feared this future, not of brutality, but sedation. Not a world of tyrants, but a world of content citizens who never question, never suffer, never wake up. The real, hopeless victims of mental illness, he wrote, are to be found among those who appear to be most normal. Because normal has come to mean numb. Always entertained, always medicated, always fine. But you don't want to be fine. You want to be alive. And being alive is not safe. It is not curated. It is not optimized. It is raw. It is sacred. It is intimate. And it is yours. You start to remember this when you stop chasing the next hit. When you sit in the discomfort. When you say no to the algorithm and yes to your body. When you choose solitude over noise. Stillness over scrolling. Truth over comfort. At first, it's terrifying. You feel everything you buried, the grief, the confusion, the unmet needs, the truth you tried to silence. But then, a shift. You feel the texture of your own soul again. The pulse beneath the panic, the clarity beneath the chaos, the quiet voice that was never gone, just drowned. You begin to trust yourself again. Not the performative self, the primal self, the present self. You feel joy, not as a spike, but as a state. You feel connection, not through performance, but through presence. You feel pain, not as a threat, but as a teacher. You no longer crave the constant hit, because you've remembered how to sit with the moment. And now, the world feels different. Slower, deeper, less stimulating, but more alive. You find meaning in small things again. A deep breath, a long pause, a single honest conversation, a walk without music, a night without screens, a tear that falls without shame. This isn't regression. This is return. A return to what you are beneath the noise. A return to reality. Not the digital one, not the marketed one, but the felt one. Because the opposite of numbness isn't ecstasy, it's presence. And presence is enough. You no longer need the world to entertain you, because you are no longer escaping yourself. You've stopped outsourcing your aliveness. You've stopped renting your worth. You've stopped begging pleasure to do what only truth can. You have remembered the oldest thing, that pain is sacred, that stillness is power, that truth is the gateway, that numbness is not protection, it's exile. And now you come home. Home to your body, home to your depth, home to your own awareness, unfiltered, unperformed, unafraid. You are not fragile. You are not broken. You were just buried. And the life you've been craving was never on the other side of pleasure. It was always on the other side of feeling.